Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Stolen Lives event. And thank you all for your presence. It's a great blessing to be here together. I'm hosting this from the Black Isle in the north of Scotland, and I know that we have visitors here from all over the world, and I'd like to thank you for your presence tonight. We are recording this session, but really just the first half of it. So the time that you spend in your feedback groups and reporting back won't be recorded, but just to let you know that we will be recording the top of the meeting. I think we should start, Peter, with a slide and the prayer asking the Holy Spirit to bless us. Holy Spirit, who lives within each one of us, give us the courage to challenge the abuse of power and its cover-up wherever we find it. Help us to move forward in solidarity and hope, empowered by compassion, determination and knowledge to bring about truth, justice and reconciliation. Just a few words about this evening. It is evening for me, it might not be evening for you. We know that you'll be mindful and respectful and consider the impact that your contributions might have on others tonight. If you're sharing information that isn't in the public domain, please do think twice and be careful not to name others. Some of us may prefer to keep our identity private, so please do give yourself a different name and perhaps even consider turning off your camera. But please remember, you're very free to use the chat option, but it is visible to everyone. And the way the Zoom works means that anyone here can save the chat as well. So just be aware of that. Let's start also by acknowledging that victims and survivors will, in all probability, be present, whether they've disclosed their abuse or not. And there may also be perpetrators present. We're very conscious of the impact that engaging with our event this evening may have on any survivors who are with us. Please make care of yourself your first priority and do consider leaving the talk if that's what's best for you. Your well-being is our very first concern. I'll now just in 2 seconds explain how the evening will, or how the event will work. Mary Varley will talk about the Stolen Lives journey so far. She'll be followed by Kevin Gallagher, who will briefly outline the contents of the It's Our Church document. And then we'll have a contribution by Maggie Matthews on why It's Our Church matters to survivors. And then we will break into small groups to share and reflect on actions that we're taking or should take. As we move through this evening's sharing, would you bear in mind that we're in a time of reflection and review of where Stolen Lives must go next? And I'd invite you, and I'll try to remember to repeat this invitation to all of you to let us know what you think our next steps should be. So with that, I have great pleasure in introducing my friend, Mary Varley.
Thank you, my friend. So what we want to do is to tell you the Stolen Lives story. It's not going to be a talk in the conventional sense. So I wanted to start by saying that without people like you here tonight, who really care about the damage that the church is doing and offer Root and Branch and Stolen Lives such support and commitment, I don't think Stolen Lives could actually exist. So just a word about me. When I retired, I was a child protection inspector in local authorities, and I felt worn out by the demands of the job, and I was very glad to leave it behind. But then during COVID lockdown, I started reading and exploring about clerical abuse and the extent to which it was being denied and covered up. And what I discovered hit me so hard, I realised I just got to do something. About the same time, I found Root and Branch online, and immediately I felt at home with people who trusted and respected each other and who were as troubled about the church as I was. I found myself, almost without thinking, offering to contact people who were working to support victims and survivors. It was just something that I had to do. And I think maybe other people here might have gone through something of the same process. Anyway, in the summer before the synod, I contacted Paul Campbell of MAXAS, which is the Ministry and Clergy Sexual Abuse Survivors, and he came to our Bristol synod. There we are. In the autumn of 2021, after the synod, a small group of survivors of clerical sexual violence and myself started talking about what we wanted to do. We chose our name to emphasize that clerical abusers had deprived children and adults of the lives that they were entitled to. I could hardly believe it when a small group of survivors, people who'd been so grievously harmed by the church, but yet they were willing to place their trust in us. And I was praying that I wouldn't be yet another of those people who'd let them down. But although different ones of us are involved in other work, we've stayed together. And it was from those conversations that Stolen Lives was born. So our mission, simply, we wanted to give voice to victims and survivors. And we wanted to spotlight the deep physical, emotional, and spiritual lifelong impact of clerical abuse and the corruption involved in its form. Now, you might have heard us say something about putting survivors at the heart or the centre of what we do. So I'd like to just explain a little bit about that. Okay, I'm sure this extract from Galatians is familiar to everybody, but how far from the truth is that today? So our starting point was a church, you could keep pressing, Peter, that excludes and discriminates. So many of us experience a patriarchal and an autocratic church. As a woman, I know that women are in the minority, but we're excluded from ministry and government. The church discriminates against people on account of their sexuality. Racism is alive and kicking in the Catholic Church, even though it takes different forms in different places. Many people in parish communities also experience classism, and people with disabilities are excluded from full participation. And really sadly, so are children, because the church doesn't often meet young people where they're at. So, next slide, please, Peter. But what we have is a church of exclusion and injustice. But for victims and survivors, on top of the pain that might be caused by being excluded or discriminated against, they've also suffered in some truly unimaginable ways through being abused. Just quickly, 2 examples. Women are discriminated against as women, but many female survivors also talk about how on top of that, they've been subject to clerical violence and, unbelievably, further abuse when they report their abusers. Some of them describe how reporting the abuse re-traumatizes them. That some white males, including priests and religious, we often recognize them, don't we, as privileged and members of a clerical elite, but they too have been subjected to sexual violence in seminaries and parishes. Next slide, please, Peter. Not this one, the next one.
Yeah, do you want to see if you can pick up from there so I can sort the breakout rooms? Just, yeah.
It doesn't seem like it now.
Okay, right, okay, we'll have to.
I'm so sorry. Right, okay. So let's now talk about clericalism. Clericalism creates the conditions in which abuse thrives. Yeah, just go, yeah, okay, stop there for a second. What are those conditions? Deference, superiority, entitlement, and the existence of a clerical class who learn that they're, after they've been ordained, going to be acting in the person of Christ. They're intrinsically superior to all the other people of God. So if I were to put it bluntly, I would say that priests, bishops and cardinals have got away with it, with power abuse for so long because they've been seen as untouchable, and children and adults have paid the price. So you've seen two examples of what I would say are the visible signs of a clericalist church. Peter, can we have the next slide? Yeah, but you know, this is just to remind us that clericalism isn't always so prominently displayed. You don't need to be in a full liturgical uniform to practice clericalism. And in my experience, even priests whom I respect and care for can be unaware of how their behaviour can be in effect clericalist. Next slide, Peter, please. This is my favourite quote about clericalism. It says it all to me. Baked into ecclesial life like cinnamon in a cinnamon roll. Next slide, please, Peter. So, what must change? There are lots of groups working to challenge clerical power abuse, and I think that's as it should be, because each victim and survivor is unique, and there are many paths that need to be trodden. Some groups provide support and advocacy for victims. Groups like Loud Friends offer a way for the church to connect with survivors. And some groups offer spiritual healing. But where do we put our focus? And this is where we put it. We're looking at structural, systemic and cultural change. We want to provide information and understanding of the damaged institutional church. And we want to provide information about the corruption involved when the reputation of the church is placed above the safety of children and adults. And we also want to be activists, publicising the experience of survivors and commenting in the press. But I did want to add that how we work together is at least as important as what we do. The church has done its best to render victims and survivors powerless. So putting survivors at the centre means creating the very opposite, where survivors are in the driving seat. None of us can get it right all of the time, but putting survivors at the centre means seeing the world of the church through their eyes. So, for example, so much of church activity seems to me to be focused on getting survivors back to church. But it actually means putting survivors at the centre, that understanding, even passing by a church, can produce flashbacks. That saying, I'll pray for you, might be difficult. And just one short example for a survivor. It makes me very wary, and I say, is this a cop-out? I can make a long list of people who told me they'll pray for me, and even say that's all I can do. I've been told that God's time is different from ours, and that I need to wait for God's time. It feels to me like it's a way, it can be a way of avoiding doing anything. So, how did we set out to achieve this? Next slide, please, Peter. Our first series of talks was based around 21 stories from survivors. If you remember Brian and A711 talking in the very first talk about their experiences. You might remember Tom Doyle, the canon lawyer, courageous man, a real strong ally of survivors. but we decided we shouldn't leave it there. We thought we should turn the talks into a learning resource that could be open to anybody, anywhere, freely available. And actually, the way I would describe these stories, I'd say that they're precious and they're painful gifts, and that we really hope that by listening to these voices, it's going to strengthen mine and yours determination to get justice for survivors in a transformed church. Two issues that we tackle. We talk about language mattering. We point out where, in fact, language can be used to minimize and sanitize sexual abuse. And next slide, please, Peter. And importantly, we wanted to spotlight the full range and the depth of clerical violence and power abuse. So you'll find in the resource stories about nuns in forced labour. You'll hear about many people who've suffered emotional abuse. You'll hear about physical, sexual, spiritual, emotional abuse for people in the care of the church. You'll hear about First Nation children who were just forced away from their families to acculturate to an alien culture. You'll find about sexual abuse. You'll find about sexual abuse of seminarians, nuns in conditions of modern slavery. You'll hear and listen to people who've been subject to violent sexual crimes. We talk about the hurt that priest partners and priest children experience. And we also put a little spotlight on the everyday microaggressions that we might actually not notice. So what did we do next? Well, it's my turn now, thankfully. Peter, if you carry on with the PowerPoint, to hand over to Kevin.
I assume you can hear me?
Yeah, that's good,
Yeah.
Kevin.
Okay, right. Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Gallagher. I'm part of the Root and Branch core group, just like Mary Varley. And also like Mary Varley, before joining, I was somewhat at a loss with the Catholic Church, having worked in a diocese for quite a number of years and seeing things that you're not supposed to see. I was really struggling, but thankfully found a very warm home in Root and Branch, and I hopefully you will do too. And you know, part of Root and Branch is Get Stolen Lives, and today we're talking about this new publication, this new release. It's our church, and it's up to us. Mary's already introduced survivor stories, which gave us the language and the understanding of the lifelong devastating impact of this horrifying abuse. Reclaiming Stolen Lives took it on a step more, where we started to focus on taking action. And we have to say, who is going to take the action? If it's not us, well, actually who? If not now, then when? And I think, as we have heard, as we are seeing, I think the church is maybe trying to sweep all of this under the carpet. I personally talk about the 3 Ds, the 3 Ds, 3 dimensions: the deny, then the deflect, and then the delay. Deny, deflect, delay. Well, let's change it into another 3 Ds, just do, and do. And that's what this document is all about. Our starting point for this is the moral responsibilities as just citizens of the world, citizens of a world that God created. And we're all responsible for each other. That's our starting point. And the start in challenging, horrifying clerical sexual violence and abuse. And as always, we put the survivors at the centre. And we have started with survivors' stories and experiences. Just want to bring out a few points that are in the resource. One is that families, friends, parishes, churches, us, we are all harmed by power abuse. very much am. I think of my grandfather many years ago reading, right, the faithful Catholic novenas every week, daily mass. He had a son who was a priest, reading for the first time about clerical abuse, and he just couldn't take it. His sense of betrayal was absolutely huge. He couldn't talk about it. He couldn't. So there are many who are affected by this horrifying issue. So for every single victim of power abuse in the church, there will be many secondary victims, family, friends, other lay people. Also, let's not forget the good priests and the religious, and ultimately the whole church. So what do? Well, we need to listen, but listen not just with our ears, but with our heart and our mind. And listening is one of the most precious gifts we can give to anybody. It's very cathartic. Think of yourself in those days when you have a problem and you go and talk to somebody and the problem just seems much smaller. The thing hasn't gone away, but just having somebody listening to you, somebody who legitimizes the pain that you're going through means so much. And to be silenced, not to have your story talking, just adds further abuse to abuse. So let's just listen. The simple act of listening is so powerful. So let's not think of it as I only listened. I just listened with my ears. And let's not be worried about I don't know what to do. Just listen. No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. But what we can offer depends on many different things. Well, our comfort zones, our confidence. Some of us are more comfortable with political on the big scale. Others more with our relational framework, offering support. We could develop liturgies and the resources for priests and religious. Some are more skilled with writing, others in campaigning, maybe direct action. There is a huge range of things that we can do, but everybody can do something. And just remember, there is no forgiveness without justice. No forgiveness without justice. It's very easy to say, I am sorry. It's very much part of the political vocabulary at the moment, but justice must come along with forgiveness. The church has often said that it is sorry, but has there been justice, actions of justice behind those words of I am sorry? Well, let's just remind ourselves, no true forgiveness without justice. And we can't afford to wait. There's been so many reports have come out, there's been reviews, there's the ICSA report recently, but still we have things like no independent therapy or counselling available if survivors want this, paid for independent therapy. Spiritual and pastoral support is still not widespread, very patchy, and some survivors are still experiencing brick walls of silence. And again, as we mentioned before, it's like being abused all over again. Okay, thanks, Mary. We've moved on to the next slide. And I just want to say, sorry, could we go back? We'll go back to slide 60. Yeah, okay. Thank you. So part one of our document is written by survivors, and it gives a feel for what disclosing feels like. How does it feel for a survivor to disclose the fact that this horrifying act has been perpetrated upon them? There is a section on when you say do, this is how I might feel, and so on. And there's also a part on the challenges that we might meet when we do into some kind of action. So this slide actually shows some of the things you might find yourself having to react to or respond to. So, and you can see, I'm sure you won't be surprised at any of the things here. One of the big things for me, I often think is, oh, that's all been dealt with, now we can move on. And I think, as we know, it hasn't all been dealt with. So I'm sure much of what you're reading here, you are very familiar with. Could we have the next slide, please? Mary. So So this is what it's all about. These are some of the areas that we cover in part 2 of the document. So taking action means acknowledging we won't always get it right. In fact, we will get it wrong. That's okay. Just realize we have some blind spots. Realize that what we take for granted can be traumatizing for victims and survivors. Survivors have told us they don't need to hear about our fears and our anger, or to feel we're asking them to forgive, or that I'm not like all the others, right, and so on. And this is all in this publication, in this document. And there are many lists, many examples of ways that action can be taken, as we can see here. Be informed, active listening, offer information, challenging toxic silence, and speaking up. Prayers and liturgies, so many, huge range. It's all in the publication. But please, again, we're back to we can all do something. Go up the next slide, Mary, please. Thank you. And then there is direct action. Badges, silent witness, non-cooperation, withholding financial support. When that plate or box comes round, maybe consider putting a little note in instead of your £5 or £10, a little note with a message saying why you are withholding financial support. Direct lobbying, peaceful demonstrations, public witness, and so on. In this picture, you will see a wonderful example of direct action in Rome. The Vatican VII, Rhiannon, who is part of our core team here tonight, and other brave women from the women's ordination worldwide. At a meeting of the cardinals in Rome, made this demonstration, stood silently with these umbrellas. You can see it's raining men. Were arrested by the police while on the way to the police station. Actually persuaded them to go for a cup of coffee along the way, but after that, they were held for several hours, 7 women, a real danger to society, as you can see, right? So kept in prison, but the point was made, and it did get much attention. So here's another option: direct action. Then they must be really onto something when it resulted in such a heavy-handed response. Next slide, please, Mary. And this is good. Some of you may have heard of Light Fence, the Light Fence Initiative, which is a form of direct action, which you can all do in your diocese and cathedrals, or in your parish. So Light Fence, it's a fence that speaks. It's a fence that speaks with a loud voice. A light fence represents the voices of those who wish to express support for those who have been subjected to injury by clerical abuse and clerical violence. And you can see a light fence outside of a cathedral here on the top right-hand side. Inside the cathedral, you will see an empty chair that represents victims who cannot go inside a church anymore, just can't bring themselves to cross that threshold. On the left, you will see a light fence that actually has gone international. This was one in Lourdes a few weeks ago. Light fence is a long stream of ribbons and notes on the railings of a church wall, cathedral wall, with notes and stories and support for victims of clerical violence. Now, this is a wonderful form of direct action. Invite the Light Fence to your parish, to your cathedral, and ask them to organise this. So, and I think that's it. I'm going to now hand over, thanks for your listening, and I'm now going to hand over to Maggie Matthews for our next section.
Kevin, thanks very much for that. So I'm Maggie, and I was part of the Region Branch team and quite involved with Stolen Lives, helping Mary invite some of the speakers into it. And for me, it became quite a very directly personal journey, because partly by being so moved by hearing the stories from Brian Devlin, and from Paul Maxis, and from A711, who had given testimony to the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse here in the UK. And talking more a bit with Mary, in the end, I ended up writing something of my own story for the Stolen Lives resources. So I'm a person who'd experienced child sexual abuse. And then within the church context, I experienced sexual misconduct from a priest in the context of confession. And if it hadn't been for Stolen Lives, I'm not sure I'd ever spoken about that with anybody. And for me, it's been life-changing in terms of being able to form connections with other people and trying much more to get to grips with this. Okay, I'm Catholic and still Catholic. How on earth do I be Catholic? And partly what happened with myself directly, but to be honest, much, much more with so many of those other victims. How can I stay in this church unless I am fighting for justice in some way? And that's why I'm incredibly grateful that, what is it, there's 64 of us here. I'm incredibly grateful that that you're here and that you're prepared to take part in these difficult conversations. And what I would say is that it matters. It matters. It changes people's lives. And this building of a community that is prepared to speak up, that is helpful in terms of this fight for justice, however people want that to be processed. So as part of doing this brief slot, before we go into our group discussions, before I did this, I wanted to ask a few of the other people that I know who've shared some of this painful experience, what they wanted to say about what It's Our Church means to them. So I'll just read to you. Okay, so one of the people who is here on the Zoom, this is what they said. So the feeling of being seen, heard and valued, and appreciation of the time and effort that's gone into this resource gives me both hope and a sense of belonging. I look forward to seeing the resource being used, to hearing feedback from it, and I would be interested to see what kind of discussions it provokes. Will it change minds and hearts? Will it change people's perceptions of victims, survivors in a positive way? Will clergy take the time to read and use it? And yes, I still have a deep-seated need to be heard and understood by the institutional church. Thank you for this. Thank you for recognizing that I might have something hopefully valuable to offer. Thank you for sharing my thoughts and feelings. If they can help even one victim or one person listening, I would be very happy. Okay, and so another person that I asked said, it matters to me because of our need to get beyond clericalism. I sense the altar rail being put back up again, and that's evidenced by the sort of language from the priests coming out of seminaries. I need a church that leaves all that behind. Someday, perhaps there will be a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. The church is heading towards an existential crisis, and we have to be custodians. All of it matters to me. And then my third friend said, it matters to me because it might mean that survivors feel others in the church are actually bothered about what has happened to us. if ordinary people in the church spoke up, it would contrast massively with the silence and disbelief that we're used to. So it matters. And I'm very glad you're here for the discussions. And Brian, is it you I'm handing over to?
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Mary, as well. That was very moving and very, very important, I felt. You've heard the explanation, the summary of what It's Our Church contains. Now, the key part of this session is over to you. This has been an amazing experience. The feedback that we've got has been rich, and it's been very, very important. And we will capture this. And what we would like you to do is to email us with your reflections. The email address is there. It's hello@rootandbranch, all one word, .org. And we would dearly love to hear from you more. And we also want feedback about what further events and what else you would like to see from us here in Root and Branch and Stolen Lives. So with that, I want to thank you all. You've worked hard and I appreciate it. I want to introduce you to my friend Maggie Conway, who is going to say a few words about an event that's coming up called Human Rights in the Catholic Church. Maggie, if you're there, you are. I see your slide. Over to you, Maggie.
I am here, and I know I'm on a clock, so it's going to be very swift, but hopefully it will be something that you will all celebrate. Some of you will know about Spirit Unbounded, for others you won't. So I just want to tell you very quickly that Spirit Unbounded is a vision. It's a root and branch-led initiative to provide a platform where a global community of Catholic reform and other Christian and ecumenical networks and groups can meet, can learn, can share and support, and can replicate ways of being church. So I think that talks to what you were just mentioning about, Mary Margaret. We need to come together because together we are stronger. It is our church. And together we will find the way of being church and will nurture the emerging church together. So I would like to tell you about an event that is coming up. If only, yes, my PowerPoint will move forward. So we are going to host a hybrid event in Rome in October, and it will be on the Friday the 13th and Saturday the 14th of October. It will also be in Bristol in the UK, and it will also be online globally. During this time, of course, this is when the bishops are meeting as part of the Universal Synod in Rome. Prior to those dates, from the 8th to the 12th of October, we will have a virtual only event. And what we will be focusing on are human rights in the Catholic Church, because you may or may not be aware that actually the Vatican is not signed up to the full embracing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So this will be a hybrid in-person virtual event on the 13th and 14th of October. Please put this in your diary, save the date, and a virtual program leading up to that event from the 8th to the 12th of October with very pertinent and relevant digital content. This will go out on YouTube, so you will all be able to access this. There will be tickets for the event and more information about that in due course. But ultimately, it is our lay-led response to the Synod. We've not been asked to participate. The laity have not been fully asked to participate. So we will be doing that through this event. We are program planning now. We have a stellar lineup of wonderful speakers. In Rome, we have the two-term former president of Ireland, Mary McAleese, and we have the theologian, Sister Joan Chichester. We have our tech team, our technical hub ready to go in Bristol. and they are forming and developing our digital program already. We have got some wonderful content lined up. So why human rights? Mary Varley at the beginning of this evening already spoke about some of the terrible atrocities. I've just reviewed some of them here. But there is exclusion in the church based on gender, based on marital status, based on sexual orientation. There is marginalization, and we've identified this from the results from surveys. People with disabilities are not represented significantly enough in leadership, nor are people of color, nor are women. There's exploitation and spiritual abuse of nuns, of the laity, of children. Clerical sexual abuse is rampant, and not just here, but all over the world, and has been for millennia. The betrayal is palpable. Whistleblowers are silenced. This is power abuse. It is all enabled by clericalism. This is the system that we will no longer tolerate. We will not accept further cover-up. So please visit us on our website. Email us at spiritunbounded.org. Already we have been joined by many, many other reform groups who we like to call companions on the road. We can't show you all of them here, but you will see them on the website. Here are just some of them who are with us on this journey. We are joined together. We will be stronger together. And we will be the church we deserve. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing.
And thank you, Maggie. Thank you so much. And to everyone, please do join us on this journey. And I want to invite Joyce Shepherd-Thorne to share with us our closing prayer. Joyce.
Dear Lord, we know that all too often we rely on the taken for granted way of being Christian. You show such courage in challenging the accepted ways of being and doing, spending time with people rejected and shunned by others. You were firmly on the side of the abused people. Your ideas and way of being turned your world upside down. And for this, you were murdered by the powerful. Oh, there will be times when we move forward uncertain, or when we face challenge and criticism. Give us the humility to learn from dissent, to see critique as an opportunity to reflect and reevaluate. Send your Spirit to be with us when we find ourselves to be dissenters. Show us how to remain calm, strong, hopeful, no matter how impossible the change might feel.
Amen.
Calm, strong, and hopeful. With those words, I'd like to bring this beautiful meeting to an end. You can see here on this slide that we have contact details of organisations that will be able to support people who have suffered some of the issues that have been raised today. But I would like to thank you all very, very much indeed, and thank you from the bottom of all of our hearts and Stolen Lives for the amazing work that you've done. And particularly, I would like to thank Mary Varley, Kevin Gallagher, Maggie Matthews, and all of Root and Branch for the support, and our ever-present angel from the internet, Peter, who keeps us absolutely on the right track.